Previously on the Project Umbrella podcast.
So, Romby, did you know what the creatures that stalk the Spencer estate are called?
Is it zombies?
Ouroboros! Are you looking forward to a confidential report, HD?
You wait for the moment when the new character's introduced and it was, "My name's Tyler, I survived Raccoon City." You know, you'll come crying back. I'm afraid the answer is Dorothy Lester.
Obviously.
I thought you were going to keep it topical.
Yeah, very easy indeed.
Oh.
Project Umbrella.
Hello and welcome to episode 26 of the Project Umbrella podcast, uploading data quicker than the Red Queen AI and downloading more securely than Rolf Harris's internet history. I'm Nick, better known as Neptune, and joining me today is Batman.
Hello.
Stars Tyrant.
Yeah, hi.
Romby.
Hello.
And we have George Trevor back with us.
Hi there, really pleased to be back. Hi.
Fantastic. So, coming up
Shockingly poor taste, Nick.
coming up in today's show, we're having a special podcast dedicated to probably the greatest downloadable content ever created by any organisation and company ever. That is Lost in Nightmares. We're going to be having a quick look at the news, bit of site news, and since our last podcast, we also had the Revelations 2 launch trailer. We're trying to keep it spoiler-free, but we're going to have a quick discussion on that before launching into a very special edition of Neptune's Biohazard quiz. So, without further ado, let's crack on with the news. The first bit of news leads directly nicely on from our discussion last week, in which it's now been confirmed that Resident Evil Remake HD has become Capcom's fastest selling digital title of all time. Fantastic news, I think you would agree.
Fastest selling day one PSN title.
Ever.
I
think that's what I meant, Sean.
That's probably quite a lot more than Capcom, because I mean, are there any other major digital titles, you know, that REHD would have been up against on the Capcom roster?
Not the Capcom roster, I don't think.
No.
I'd say it's done better than what even Capcom expected.
It's been really good, to be honest, and there's just such a positive buzz everywhere you've gone. You know, forums have been really buzzing about it, and I don't think you could have asked for anything better, really, short of maybe a physical release for the people who didn't want to import.
I was really pleasantly surprised when I read that report, because I really worried that it would just kind of, interest would peak with us guys and people that have been in the community for a long time, but that it just had its day and it was just, you know, so old hat. No additional extra polish would have brought it to a new audience, but it really seems that it has, though.
I still think that the acid test could be when they release Zero in HD. I mean, Remake itself was a very critically well-received game by all accounts, and in many ways you could argue that it wasn't surprising that it's done well, given the HD treatment. Zero, on the other hand, if that is received well and downloaded enormously like Remake, then I think Capcom will certainly listen in going forward.
The problem with that, and this is the problem we always have when something else comes out after something else, is that follow-through effect. So if lots of people liked the HD version of Remake who hadn't played it before, didn't play the old games, and they see there's a new HD Remake out, they'll probably pay and download that anyway. But the critical comment that comes after it, that's more important, because they may spend lots of money on it and then they play it and go, this doesn't play like the other one. It's the item boxes are gone and there's all this backtracking and I don't understand what's going on. Like, it'll be a lot more different, I think, in that respect. The other part I was going to say about the sales is I also saw it was, I mean, obviously it didn't break any records on the Xbox list, but it was the top paid download on the Xbox network as well. So it was like 5th overall, and the 4 things that were in front of it were either free games for the games with gold or free DLC. So it was the top paid content when it released as well on the Xbox.
Encouraging.
That's how easy it is, Capcom.
I think the success of it will definitely shape, I think, what they do with the older games, not necessarily what they do with new titles, because, however HD it is, it's still the actual format of the game is so in the past, just in terms of the fixed camera angles and that style of gameplay and that puzzle orientated. So I can't see it having a major effect on Resident Evil 7 or anything like that, but definitely I think it will have an effect on what Capcom do with their back catalogue.
I hope people will reevaluate their opinion of Resident Evil 0 as well, because people clearly want that kind of experience again, and I think that's the closest you're going to get.
It's that hindsight thing. Yeah, I do agree. I mean, it's the same thing I've been seeing more and more recently about Resident Evil 5 in light of Resident Evil 6, and kind of how people were feeling like how Capcom been treating the mainline franchise. They're like, 5 wasn't so bad in the end. It's a retrospective look, and I think that's the same thing that kind of applies with the remake and probably with 0 as well. If people actually get the chance to play it in HD, they might go, hey, this isn't as bad as I remember, or it's way better than I expected, or it's exactly what I want, not the new stuff.
Interestingly as well, was the survey that came out that Capcom have asked everyone to fill in. It's quite long, and it asks you quite in-depth questions about how you feel about each individual game in the series, how you feel the series can improve going forward, and it's quite an interesting thing to put out.
And that's on ResidentEvil.net, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Is it finished now? I thought it was finished.
Yeah, I think
is it finished now?
I think it was February 19th you had to do it by.
Oh, right, okay. But it's still interesting.
But yeah, it was really in-depth.
Well, look, that's a good thing. I mean, it is the number one IP for Capcom, Resident Evil, and they want it to be a success, and we want it to be a success because we want to carry on playing games.
I think we're seeing a bit of a shift in Capcom. I don't know whether I spoke about this last time, but they've got 2 versions. Well, they've got 2 Devil May Cry games releasing soon. Oh. They've got a re-release of the DMC title and a special edition of Devil May Cry 4, and that almost feels like it's asking the community to support the one you want the most, and then that's the way we'll go with the series from now on. It just seems strange that they're plucking out this game from the past in the wake of its reboot. It's almost like saying, if you want us to go with the classic Dante that everybody likes, support this title and then we'll go forward with that.
Was DMs... Well, I don't know about DMs. Was it that a total reboot of the first one?
Yeah, it had a completely different reimagining of Dante. It wasn't even the same character. It didn't even look the same.
Oh, right. So it's a separate universe almost to the old...
Yeah, and it caused a big divide amongst the fans who preferred the older style and the new. And it just almost feels like Capcom have sort of hit this point in their development history where they're having to actually listen to feedback now, and
they've got no original ideas themselves, it seems.
Yeah.
So they can't bring out any new IPs that are going to...
Well, no, that's not true either. I mean, they are still investing in new IPs, but they're taking longer than they expected. There's that one that they showed off. What I can't remember what it is. A Deep something? I can't remember.
Deep Down.
Deep Down, thank you. And that's just been delayed and delayed and delayed because probably the same reason I think is the issue across all this is that they don't know what to do. Like, they're trying to make this game in a particular style, but in the time it's taken them to develop that game, other games have been already released that were kind of more in that style already, and now they're like, oh, if we come out now, we're just going to look like a copy of that game, or people won't pay attention to it because it...
the funny thing with Deep Down is I think it's basically seen as like a Souls series clone, like Dark Souls. And Lords of the Fallen has come out, and it's not been that warmly received. So I think Capcom have looked at that probably and think, we have to really bring our A game here, because if we don't, it's just going to get compared against the Souls series and be forgotten.
When it comes to like Devil May Cry, I think the other issue was that the new DMC kind of almost to a certain degree, and this is because they had their outside developers, almost spat in the face a little bit of the old fans. They kind of had that whole tease about the hairstyle and making jokes about it. And the new Dante is pretty much just a dick. Like he just is. That's his character. He just acts arrogant the whole time, and there's no real humor to it. It's just a lot of swearing and just arrogance. And that also kind of put off the old fans, and I can kind of understand why they wouldn't know where to go with that. And then you've got the same problem with Resident Evil, which is that they know they've got a set of fans who like the old style, they've probably got a set of fans who like the new style, and they don't know which one they have to please more.
But nothing will have told them what people want more than the sales of the remake, and that's why I think it was really important that people supported it. Even if for some people you are triple dipping, or it was important.
So where does Revelations, which is itself become its own franchise or sub-franchise, where does that fit in? Is it the complete halfway between old style, new style?
I think until we've played the whole game, it's too hard to say.
Yeah.
So many reviews have said the biggest problem with Revelations 2 is its episodic nature. Just as it's starting to really get going with the story, it's a tune in next week.
No. I can't quite get my head around it. Am I missing something obvious as to what is in it for the video game company to release things in this episodic way? I don't quite understand what the benefit is in the marketing. It doesn't seem to have any benefit to the player.
They want people to buy it digitally, and then they want people to buy the disc with the extra stuff on.
Yeah, when I asked about that to the producers, the response I got, and I think I mentioned this last time, was just the idea of getting discussion going and having it spread out over weeks, which is probably a valid point. Like, that is probably going to happen, but I mean, essentially, if you guys end up doing a cast every time there's an episode, for example, then it will be over weeks for you, just for this alone. But the people on forums and stuff will be talking about it for weeks. I think that's going to backfire. I mean, that's me personally, because of the same problem, the same reason the reviewers are saying, this is kind of problematic. I think people are just going to be like, once they play maybe the first episode or even the first couple, they'll be like, why didn't they just release this as a full game? Like,
or understand, release it digitally earlier as the whole game, but just in the episodic way, like you say, it just seems to be as you're just getting into the game. It's like rationing your experience of it, and not everyone's the same. People, want to kind of play through the game as quickly as possible and complete it as quickly as possible. Other people, do it in a different way. It just seems to me to restrict the gameplay experience rather than expand it.
We talked about it last time as well, and the problem with this whole digital thing is that it's really got confusing marketing around the pre-order bonuses and extra content on the disc, and whether or not you go for the digital download or you wait for the disc version. And it's that as well only hampers this whole episodic thing even more, because you don't know, even if you wanted to have it episodically, what way you're going to have it. Like, do I pre-order it? Do I buy it now? Do I wait while everyone else is playing it?
It's come out today in North America, and the first reviews have been trickling in. They seem to be fairly positive thus far, and Romby, you said the Metacritic was about 75?
Yeah, the Xbox version I saw was 75. I didn't check the others. I should actually have a look.
But that would almost, I suppose, correspond with what Revelations scored.
I was flicking back on BioHaze today to when the first Revelations game came out, and the response from pretty much everybody on the forums was overwhelmingly positive. They were saying, it's just what we want, after Resident Evil 5. It's the classic mix of old and new, and everybody was praising the hell out of it, and time hasn't been kind to it. And no. I expect the same thing to happen here.
We shall see.
I was going to say 74 PlayStation 4, nothing for PC yet, nothing for PS3, nothing for 360, and Xbox One 75 currently averaged. But mind you, it's only a small number of critics right now. It's about 5 or 6.
Well, you can expect a lot of coverage from the Project Umbrella podcast in relation to Revelations 2 in the next couple of weeks. I'll explain a bit more about that later. The final bit of news, which quite coincidentally for our topic of the evening, is that Resident Evil 5 Gold Edition is coming to Steam.
Yes. Resident Evil 5 came out on PC. It was attached to the Microsoft Games for Windows platform, but that's now being shelved. And so a lot of the games have some developers are no longer supporting the games because they're so old, but Capcom's been mostly moving its games across to Steam because it's an available platform. Resident Evil 5 is available on Steam. It already has been. But it didn't have any of the PC versions, never had the downloadable content at all. This is what's new. And this is what's making a lot of people happy who've had the game and are waiting for it. But of course they haven't made any announcements on how it's going to be distributed and what the costs will be. But it's coming because there's been a patch and the achievements have been updated to include the DLC.
I can't imagine it costs too much. I mean, even brand new on the PlayStation, the Gold Edition only cost about £20.
It'd be nice if it just updated to it.
Which is a possibility. It's probably not going to happen, but it is a possibility.
That concludes all our Resident Evil news. Site news comes from Ridley again. He's been updating his magazine database with the latest scans from Famitsu, showing off some of the non-playable characters from Revelations 2. Gina Foley, Pedro Fernandez, Gabriel Chavez, and Neil Fisher.
Pedro! Hey, Nick.
Yes.
You notice that the Thompson fellow's not among them, don't you?
There we go. Also, Ridley has kindly uploaded issue 4 of Biohazard Heavenly Island, which feel free to do whatever you want to do with that.
Got to keep that going, you know.
Oh dear. Anyway,
Yeah, Nick, hang on. Is there no Mahara Desire news?
no, not yet. But we do have.
It's being released in English, isn't it?
Yes.
They've had the second one's already out.
Oh, Nick, where...
That made the news last time.
I thought that was issue 1.
Yeah, you haven't talked about issue 2 yet.
Oh. There we go, folks. Issue 2 is being released in English. So in case you still haven't played Resident Evil 6 and don't know what's going on, you can not find out what's going to happen by reading the prequel manga. So that concludes all our news.
It's okay. We're gonna get out of here. Oh my god. Run, Moira!
I'm here, baby. Please be alive.
So, you finally came.
You don't even know what to be afraid of yet.
We have these bracelets. Jesus, is anyone even out there?
Thanks, Barry.
Don't be scared.
See? We're like sisters.
Where's Moira? What have you done with her?
One final test.
And what we're going to do now is have a quick discussion on the Revelations 2 launch trailer, which I hope everyone has had a view of. I haven't seen it in English, but I've seen the Japanese version. And what are now everyone's final expectations before release?
I think it's... God, I feel ashamed for saying this. I think it could be Alex Wesker.
Ooh.
I think it could be. I think the glasses-wearing woman in the reveal trailer is probably on the money.
You can still have Dorothy Lester at 500 to 1.
Or Art Thompson at 1,000.
You wait till I pick up that first file at midnight when I start playing it and it says an A. Thompson.
I would say
with the Wesker stuff in the trailer, I just think there's a Wesker connection there somewhere, and the only Wesker thing they've got left to do is the Wesker children.
Yeah, I think he looks quite young in that picture, so I think it's a picture of Alex, Albert, and Spencer. Sometime in the early 1990s. But obviously Alex and Albert don't know their significance to each other at that point.
My thoughts on the trailer is at least Capcom is consistent with spoiling its games in the final release trailer before it comes out. It's happened for the last few of them.
The trailer does. I mean, if that's a tyrant, then yippee. Can't wait.
And I think we can definitively say that Ouroboros is back as well. Which I think's a good thing, really, because I think it helped Resident Evil 4 enormously when they brought the Plagas back for Resident Evil 5. And I think if we're to have Ouroboros in another game, it won't seem so throwaway, because it just seems like we've had a lot of viruses recently that just turn up for one game and are never heard from again.
And especially if it ties into this kind of story that is branching essentially off 5 a lot anyway, which it seems to be the case because we keep seeing all these hints and references to the events of that game, so it only adds to it.
And if that woman is Alex Wesker, then she'd obviously be able to adapt to Ouroboros as well.
Yes, of course.
Sorry, you see that quick shot of the tentacles sort of grabbing Moira, as if someone's controlling them, and that quick shot of the tyrant you get as well. It looks like Ouroboros is taking over that tyrant as well, so I'm looking forward to it now, I really am.
Member Dusk Gollum on the Project Umbrella forums tells us that Jill Valentine is a playable character in raid mode.
Yeah, screenshots have come out today.
Someone posted on BioHaze that Matthew Mercer's name's in the credits as well, so Leon might be in raid mode as well.
Yeah, I don't know if they were mistaken with Matthew Mercer, because I got a message from someone telling me that they saw the name in the credits for the voice actor for Steve's VA, from Darkside Chronicles.
No.
Steve.
Yeah, Yeah, but I don't know if they saw Matthew Mercer. Maybe they mistook that with Mercer. I don't know. But no, I just got that message today that they saw Steve's VA pop up in the credits.
Who was the voice actor for Darkside Chronicles?
Let me see if they've in the message.
I know the IMDb page had Steve Burnside and Alexia Ashford in the cast. Someone always likes to do that to piss about with it.
And he can come back from the dead again. Or whatever the hell it is. I can't remember the line, but God.
I tell you what though, playable Alexia Form 1 would be quite fun, wouldn't it? It's just mucking around with that sticking out her hands and going fire.
The Steve thing might actually make sense for raid mode because you've got the clear connection. There's already references to the events of Code Veronica and dialogue that I've seen. So
if they flash back to the Darkside Chronicles version of events, then you will hear of a suicide in Lincolnshire.
Well, it depends what they do. I think there's a small amount which is okay to flashback from.
No.
Is there nothing?
None of Darkside Chronicles, Nick, unless you like Ada firing rocket-powered lipsticks.
It's from the Oracle Dragon. She says here, Sam Regal. Is that the chap? Sam Regal.
You're the voice person, George, you know.
Well, not when it comes to Darkside Chronicles. No. I live in the past.
Speaking of flashbacks, though, do you reckon we're going to get some Wesker flashbacks in this? Because I can't imagine they'd hire DC Douglas just to record raid mode sounds, considering they must already have him on file for mercenaries and...
I live on through Ouroboros.
Yeah. Oh dear.
I think they try and get fresh dialogue, I guess. I'm just looking at that list for Darkside Chronicles. Yes, Sam Regal, or he was credited as Samuel Regal, but he was the voice in Darkside Chronicles. So if he was in the credits, but I mean that may mean they've just reused him for that character, or maybe they've just cast him for something else.
Yeah, because I think
that's true.
I think Crispin Freeman, who played Frederick Downing in Resident Evil Degeneration, is playing the head of TerraSave. Is it Neil Fisher, the guy who turns up in the intro? I think that's Crispin Freeman who plays him.
I hope there's good mention of Degeneration. I mean, the fact that they've brought in back TerraSave.
Just when you think the dialogue couldn't get worse, there is a Claire Sandwich reference.
Oh no! I joked that last week.
No, it is actually in there. I think the context makes it a little bit better. If it was just that line for no reason, it probably would be really, really crazy. But I at least like the fact that she gets a response. So Barry's been telling you that story as well, like as if it was like something that he tells everyone about. It's so funny.
It's like his party piece.
15 years ago.
But he doesn't even say it in remake.
No, that's the thing. It was the thing I said to someone as
Any
well.
longer, you'd have fit inside a sandwich.
Oh, is that what? Oh, right. Okay.
Well, he doesn't say the original version, but this is the thing. There's a disconnect between the humour of the original voice acting from the 1996 version that everyone remembers, and the version that they used, which is the 2002 one, and then the storyline kind of references the 1996 dialogue more than it does the 2002 one, because the English, like I don't think everyone's a fan of the original, but obviously these lines are well known, the ones that Barry spouted out in 1996.
Barry?
There's probably going to be a Master of Unlocking reference somewhere, no doubt, as well, and probably all sorts of other ones.
And the woman with the blonde hair in the trailer. I mean, I don't mean to offend people, but I've been on certain forums and people are convinced it's Rachel Foley from Revelations because of the hair, or it's Lisa Trevor from Resident Evil 1 who the mansion explosion caused her to regain a human appearance.
No one said that.
You have not read that.
I've read that.
Really?
You go on,
Wow.
go on places like NeoGAF, there is some scary people out there. You can tell they genuinely believe it as well.
The same kind of people who once described Wesker as a super stealth tyrant.
Oh, but yeah, Wesker Children, Tricell, 15 years of Barry backstory, Ouroboros, Tyrants, bring it on.
And all the references on top of it as well, the ones that we don't even know yet.
But in 5 weeks' time, we'll be sitting here and it'll be some throwaway villain who's framed TerraSave because he wants to show how dangerous bioterrorism is to the world.
Yes, I can imagine
for the fifth time in a row.
The podcast title will be episode 27, What Went Wrong, and I'm sure we'll be dissecting the entire game as affluently as we can. That's all I want to talk about Revelations 2, because our main discussion of the evening is the downloadable content that is Lost in Nightmares.
A few years ago, the BSAA received intel as to the whereabouts of Umbrella's founder, Oswell E. Spencer. Jill and I were ordered by the BSAA's European headquarters to apprehend him. We accepted that mission in the hopes of uncovering some info that would lead us to Wesker. Chris to HQ, come in. We're at the target's location.
Copy that, Chris. Move in and procure the target.
Roger that.
What can you tell us about the area?
The satellite scan isn't showing anything out of the ordinary, but regardless, you should expect the unexpected.
Understood. We're in.
Let's move.
So, George Trevor, I know you've been calling for a separate podcast in Lost in Nightmares since time began, and you have your wish. I will start with you on your brief views on what makes this a near-perfect Resident Evil experience.
Yeah, can I start by saying missed opportunity?
You can.
There's so much specific points about this game I thought would be ideal to take the series forward. Just specifically the combat, the extra orientation on combat, but not just going forward, blind combat, but actually combat that, with a specific method. So, with the blob, you've got that whole procedure with the cranks and crushing them, and that was really intense. And I found that really tense and unnerving, those battles. And then the choice at the beginning of having fixed camera angle or not. So I just don't understand why that almost was like a throwaway little Easter egg for just Lost in Nightmares, and I just thought would have been absolutely ideal for, expanding the audience, keeping the older and the new players. So I thought it, more than any other game since, it married the two styles perfectly.
Batman?
Well, for me, I enjoyed it as a game, but for me it was all about the story, because as soon as you step into that mansion and it flashes up the Spencer estate, you think, well, this is what we've been waiting for so long. You're in this house that belongs to Spencer. There's probably all kinds of Umbrella's secrets in here. Wesker's around here somewhere. It was just, you'd been building up to that really ever since arguably the original game. But in terms of the DLC itself, I thought it was great. It was just a little bit short. Very atmospheric. I loved the files. I just wish there was a few more rooms in the mansion you could go into. Just a few more optional sort of drawing rooms and bedrooms and things like that. But yeah, I loved it really. I just echo George's opinion.
Romby?
I mean, what I remember the most about it, I mean, it's been a few years since I played it, but it is just the fact that the whole thing was like a love letter to the original games. Music references, dialogue references, file references. Just the whole thing felt like an actual labour of passion about the origins of the franchise, which tied this as exactly what we were just talking about, the two ends of the spectrum, like the original story and this latest DLC kind of in one whole. And I just remember being really impressed by it, and it should have been a perfect example of how to move forward, because the game is tense and there's limited ammunition, and yeah, it's a very, very well designed piece of DLC. I don't know what else to say about it.
Starstone?
We discussed this last time, but I mean, I just thought it was just a phenomenal piece of DLC, arguably still the best piece of DLC in gaming sort of history. It was very cheap. It didn't cost really anything to buy. And although it is only an hour long, it's one of the finest hours of the series, irrespective of, what play style it decided to go with. I think the camera angles really make it feel like a wonderful homage to the times of old. And the only criticism I have about it is the fact that it really should have been released, as I've said before, as like a cheap playable prologue that they could have released a month or two prior to 5 to give the community a chance to experience Jill being gone. From a marketing point of view, it would have been really good if we'd had it before 5. But then that you might have gone in thinking, why isn't 5 more like this?
This is exactly what I was about to say, is that I think that's a brilliant idea, except for the fact I know so many people would have been so disappointed if they'd gone from that to what 5 was. That it would have just been so much more crushing, I think.
Especially after the first kind of teaser trailer for Resident Evil 5, which it didn't show a lot much, but it kind of gave a good atmospheric impression of what it was going to be like. And then, we just saw the kind of shadows of the zombies walking and then running suddenly in the kind of desert setting. Yeah, I think you're right. It could have been slightly almost like a total middle finger up to fans what 5 was going to be like. But I mean, that leads on nicely, I suppose, if you're talking about the kind of plots in trying to deal with the apparent death of Jill Valentine. Sadly, that the fact that she wasn't dead was well telegraphed within the game, and I think within the opening movie of Resident Evil 5, you realise that she's not dead.
I don't even think it was the opening movie. I remember probably a couple of weeks before it came out, must have been One Up did like a week of Resident Evil 5 coverage, and their title picture was like Chris kneeling in front of her grave, and I was just like, yeah, she's not going to be dead.
Yeah. So obviously the game Lost in Nightmares is set 3 years before Resident Evil 5, and in many ways it's not really related to what you kind of go through in Resident Evil 5. It's just purely the premise of setting up the reveal that Jill is alive and Wesker has her and is now controlling her. I mean, in retrospect, what did everyone think of that aspect of the plot, or the reveal of Spencer?
Well, what I wanted out of Lost in Nightmares was more information on the Wesker program, because I don't know where it came from, but because a lot of Resident Evil 5 was spoiled before release, but I don't think anybody was expecting such a game changer about that particular character. And I'd love to ask the writers what the thinking behind it was, because part of me wonders if, because they were obviously planning to kill off Wesker, who was the staple villain of the series for the previous how many years, well, right since the beginning, really. And I'm wondering if it was just kind of an insurance policy at the time.
Yep.
As if to say, yeah, we can bring him back if we need to. But then that made no sense when 6 came out, because they decided to ignore Alex Wesker and go for his son instead.
Yeah, because I thought that was quite extraordinary at the time, that for just one file in a DLC, like Bat says, just such a significant, dramatic change to the whole, Resident Evil canon.
If Revelations 2 can finish by having an 11th hour reveal that Jake is actually Alex's son, then it will be the best game in the series.
That would work, wouldn't it? That would work so much better.
Yeah, I think it would, because it's just too unrealistic to think that Wesker Albert just had a fling one time and spawns this son. It's just, it's nonsense, it really is.
I think one of the big things, obviously, with Lost in Nightmares was the fact for the first time we saw Spencer, and not just in a portrait.
Didn't Nick? He's not shown in Lost in Nightmares.
Oh no, of course he's not.
It's the cutscene, isn't it, in a Resident Evil 5?
Oh, yes. But, yeah, okay, fair enough. But I suppose I suppose it's still within the same setting, I suppose.
You mean he was sort of revealed through the files you read, his memoirs, wasn't
it? Yeah, his butler as well.
His butler, yeah.
I always took the view that it was slightly anticlimactic, Spencer, considering his build-up.
I kind of like it, though.
Yeah,
I quite like the fact that he, after all these years and all this scheming, he's just reduced to being a frail, bitter old man in a European retreat somewhere. And he basically just gets the dog's death, doesn't he, after it all?
Well, that was the one question I had about it, because I remember there's the butler's file, and he talks about how he got the butler to leak the information for him to be found, but it's never really explained as to why, other than potentially for Wesker to learn more about his background. Is that what his intent was? I was never really quite sure about that. Like, he set up his own demise.
It came across to me as just desperation, because he'd lost Alex, and I think his last throw of the dice was to get Albert back and try and convince him to
help him with the immortality.
Yeah, explain who he was, and because he obviously explained to Alex who he was, and then got Alex to join Umbrella and lead the program. And I think he was trying to do the same with Albert, because you can tell in his files how desperate he's getting, because he's getting older and he's getting more frail.
Yeah, and there's that desperation as well in him saying that he's now going to turn to his butler, and he basically resorts to using his butler as his chief scientist.
Yeah, but in terms of his reveal, I mean, what did you guys think of his ultimate reveal of what his plans were? Because obviously there was a big sort of cliffhanger from Wesker's report too about why he was doing this, because Wesker, talks about through his whole Umbrella career really about how he could never figure out Spencer and what his true motivations were, and how they'd perfected the T-virus in the mid-80s, but Spencer wanted them to keep going. But it was never explained why, until obviously all this reveal about the immortality virus and the Wesker program and whatnot.
So I thought it wasn't that original. It was quite generic, but at the same time it worked well, didn't it?
It fitted the character.
It made sense, yeah.
Especially with everything you found out about the Afro branch of Umbrella and what the original goal of Progenitor was. And although I still find his reveal slightly anticlimactic, I think the saving grace was that at least you didn't have to fight him, because I think it would have been a bit awful if he had mutated into God knows what and just formed staple villain.
Yeah, I was going to say that would be the real cliche of it. I mean, as I
Yeah.
said, I still found the motivation slightly confusing, and only because I think maybe that's my expectations. I never expect Wesker to be that sort of character that wasn't gonna. He'd already turned on him and the organisation once. There's no chance he was going to get him back. So I just never quite understood why he tried to convince him to come back. It just never made any sense. But yeah, you're right in that sense as well. With at least his demise wasn't the cliche usually turned into a giant monster thing either.
Isn't there something programming as part of the Wesker children to seek out Spencer?
Yeah, it was just I mean,
Yes.
there's a lot of misconceptions with the Wesker program. I mean, you hear people talking about clones and how they were injected with the progenitor virus when they were kids, and that's just not true. You know, there was
when Wesker says he was manufactured, he doesn't mean in a,
yeah.
He just means in the way that his life has been shaped. His life is manufactured in a sense.
Because people have looked at that picture from the Resident Evil 2 trailer and saying, "Oh, it's not Albert, it's another Wesker child," but there's no reason why any of the Wesker children would look the same.
No. All they had they were specialist people, i.e. super intelligence or whatnot.
Yeah. Doesn't the name Wesker derive from one of the original scientists?
Yeah, and all they were done as children was they were given sort of privileged educations and they were sort of conditioned to sort of seek out Spencer when they were older.
And at some point in their life, they would have been subjected to the Sonor trap. The progenitor virus that was always.
Well, there was just the variant virus that they were given sometime around '98, but I'm not sure if it was just the 13 candidates that I mentioned on the computer who got through to that stage where they were given the virus.
Because there's questions as to how much Birkin knew about it.
Yeah,
well.
I personally don't believe Birkin knew what it was. I just think Spencer gave it to him and said, "Right, make sure Wesker takes this. It does this."
I always went down an idea that Birkin did know, and they both were aware. They sort of use it against Spencer to be able to fake the death of Wesker, and both of them leave the organisation, or attempt to.
Yeah, but I mean, I can see where you're going. The only reason I'd say no to that is because I don't think Spencer would tell anybody what his true intentions were.
Yeah, very good point.
I was going to say that idea of the conditioning and stuff obviously entails you as well that he expects that he's going to leave the organisation as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the discussions between Wesker and Birkin in Zero are quite explicit as to what he wants to do. And Birkin's not trying to stop him going, "Why are you doing? Surely you're loyal to Umbrella." It's not.
Because Birkin doesn't even want to leave, does he? Because he wants to finish the G virus.
Yeah, exactly. So, but obviously he doesn't see Wesker as a potential threat to that. Equally, he doesn't blame Wesker for the outbreak in the Arclay facility. So, I suppose if he's given orders from up top to give him this, it kind of suits both their purposes at the same time. But then I would have thought Birkin would have asked quite a few questions. I mean, is it slightly coincidental that at the same time of Wesker wanting to betray the company that he's given an experimental virus that, lo and behold, should bring him back from the dead? But when tested on animals, it doesn't.
Well, I think that was more of a coincidence, really, because I think Spencer didn't give him the virus knowing he was about to leave the company. He gave him the virus to see if he could obviously adapt to it. I think the fact that Wesker was planning on betraying Umbrella and using that virus to fake his death was just a coincidence.
I'm not convinced. I mean, I'm convinced that the timing's probably a coincidence, but I get the feeling that Spencer knew that at some point he would try and do this, try and leave the company, because there's that whole reason for the inbuilt trying to seek him out, regardless of whether he's in the organisation or not.
But I just feel I think Sergei Vladimir had his doubts, because he obviously turns up at the training facility during Umbrella Chronicles and tries to kill him, essentially. But I just feel like if everybody in Umbrella thought that Wesker was going to betray them, I don't think they would have trusted him with the X-Day protocol at the mansion.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always an interesting area in terms of timeline, because they don't give you a specific date as to when the Spencer's plan was put into motion.
No.
And there's no guarantee that, of course, it would work, because a lot of the Wesker children had died, hadn't they, already? So you didn't know that it was going to adapt.
It comes across to me, anyway, that the whole T-Virus project was just... I don't think Spencer was interested in biological weapons. It was just all about trying to create this perfect virus that would help him create this race of superhumans.
It was all a front and a way of making substantial money to fund his research. But then, what research was he doing? We didn't have any... Was it just funding Alex Wesker throughout all this time?
Well, yeah, I mean, we don't know when Alex Wesker... Because at some point he must just be another candidate, just like Albert. And then at some point, Spencer's obviously told him his true origins, because he's put in charge of the project. And I think is it dated August '98 in Resident Evil 5, when Alex Wesker writes that file saying something like Albert's deaths reduced the quota down to 18% or something. And I've always wondered why, because I think Archives 2 confirms that Wesker, the original researcher, and Alex Wesker are different people.
Yes.
So I've always wondered why Spencer would tell Alex the truth about his background, because it's never really made sense to me why he would do that. Because
do you know when that happened? Like,
we don't know when it happened, no. But that August '98 date, Alex Wesker's working in the information department of Umbrella.
So is it after that?
Well, I don't know exactly when Alex Wesker joined Umbrella, but he was obviously in charge of the program then, and he was monitoring Albert Wesker during the mansion incident.
Maybe it was for the purposes of Spencer not wanting the same thing happening again that had already happened with Albert. Maybe that he was aware of the fact that he was trying to leave the company. He obviously he thinks he's dead, but that he was also trying to steal company information.
Possibly, yeah. But it's my personal theory as well, as that's why Alex betrayed Spencer in the end, because he found out he was a Wesker child.
Yeah.
Because it breaks that sort of subliminal program. It mentions in the Wesker file in Resident Evil 5 that all Wesker children are designed to seek Spencer out, but once they actually find him and find out what his intentions are, it breaks that hold.
But surely Alex would have gone, why do I happen to have the same surname as
Well, yeah.
Albert? I mean, it's not exactly Smith, is it?
Yeah.
There isn't really any other explanation given, because in that file in Lost in Nightmares, there's just that sudden, unexplained break of contacts, between Spencer and the island where Alex is doing all his research. And reading that file, it just seems to me apparent that something dramatic's happened. And, other than finding out his true sort of origins, I can't think what else would have, caused such a dramatic, disappearance. Well, we're not quite sure what happened.
This is what I'm hoping to get from Revelations 2, if that woman is Alex Wesker. Because this is obviously set 5 or 6 years after Alex betrayed Spencer. And it's obviously not the same island she's on, sorry. So hopefully we'll get some more files, and hopefully we'll get some more references to Spencer to sort of fill in the gaps.
It's a big hope. It's a big ask, I feel.
I mean, has anyone kind of further discussed, didn't one of the developers, the main developer for Revelations, say that there was that sort of Easter egg for the older fans, a particular character that would have been, unknown to all but the very diehard fans?
Yeah, we discussed that previously, and I think I commented that I suspect what Capcom considers the hardcore fan to be very different to what we consider to be the hardcore fan.
What I consider, and I said that at the time, is...
No, that's hardcore.
As I said the last time as well, I think hardcore to them is to the level of someone who could pick out a good number of the things hidden in the original announcement trailer. That was the live action one. If you could pick out several of those, you'd be considered probably hardcore.
But fair play to the fan base, though. Like, people have come up with massive theories about how this woman is Jenny Kay from Resident Evil 5, this one woman who's apparently a returning character, and she's just, that's all the mention you get of her is just a name. She's just an Umbrella employee who's missing.
I think isn't she, because that came up in a quiz question, and I only know because I devised it to make it as hard as possible. She's the only, I think, is she the only employee that's not listed as dead, or she's the only one that's kind of whereabouts unknown?
Yeah, that's right, yeah. And Capcom won't have a clue who she is, but fair play, so many fans have picked her out, and fair play to them.
And that's hoping that as well, that the name was translated correctly, if it was well, there's no information missing that was actually about the character's demise. Yeah.
But I tell you what, though, I mean, I only just noticed this the other day, but when in all the build up to Resident Evil 6, when everybody thought Derek Simmons was Alex Wesker, one of the Wesker children's actually called Derek, and I've only just clocked that. And I'm surprised nobody came up with any conspiracy theories about that. At least not that I can remember, anyway.
Isn't there the hope that, especially, I know we're talking about Lost in Nightmares, but with Revelations 2, that it's going to kind of wrap up a lot of these plot holes and whatnot in the same way that perhaps Resident Evil 5 did with all the previous storylines?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you take away Ada and what she's truly up to, the only sort of long-standing plotline you've got left is Alex Wesker and whether he or she did create this immortality virus and what they've done with it.
It would be nice if there is talk of whether they did succeed with the progenitor, because then we would have references and files back to the African facility, the use of Sonotrap, and all the things like that, which would for a lot of fans feel actually is the series coming together here.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm personally looking for.
The problem is, there's always, and we mentioned it a million times, there's always that cycle. Like, people make those jokes about the Sonic cycle, about things repeating, and they get their hopes up, and then the game comes out and they're disappointed. The same thing happens with Resident Evil. People start seeing the trailers and what's being released, they come up with these crazy theories. Some of them are more wackier than others, and then when the game comes out, it never meets any of the theories because it's completely not what anyone expects. And then the whole cycle starts again.
Yeah.
The other problem, I think, I don't know if I'm understanding this right, but with its place in the timeline, it's obviously going to be quite restricted in terms of, any immortality virus or anything that, would have had a major effect on the events of Resident Evil 6. So, it's kind of restricted and it can't, produce anything particularly significant that wasn't going to then reverberate, in RE6.
I don't know. It's interesting. Every time I play Rusted Nightmares and I stand in Spencer's study and read them files, I always wonder what Alex Wesker's doing, so hopefully they're going to address that now. I
wanted to ask on that question as well. Like, how does everyone feel about Lost in Nightmares? Obviously, some of it, like, people pointed out, some of the environment of the DLC obviously hark back to the early versions of Resident Evil 4, and obviously some of this may be ideas that had been intended for Spencer and maybe Spencer's demise, or parts to do with Wesker back then. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
I think some environments of 3.5 were used.
Yeah.
The outside courtyard, certainly.
Ridley put up a lot of comparison pics, and they are literally the same locations, just ported in.
Yeah.
But does that have any impact, do you think, on how the content was shaped for the DLC? Like, they may have, other than environments, there may have been original plans for, like, maybe the monster designs, or what they were having Spencer involved, obviously, or anything like that.
Well, the environments that from 3.5 weren't really part of a wider context, were they? Because they were more just part of a gameplay, experimental gameplay. So, and the other build of 3.5 was Leon hallucinating. So, other than the environments, I don't think there was a lot they could have taken from there.
Yeah, I don't think Wesker was originally in 3.5 either.
He was in the fog build, the very first version.
This is where I think some of these assets actually date back to, because there was the whole castle environment there and like certain stone structures, and obviously some of that went on after they'd already done that initial ideas that for the version that became Devil May Cry as well, because they had all those kind of castle environments as well.
There was that whole immortality virus. There was this, wasn't there? That there was this body that had this immortality virus in it.
Yeah, Kawamura, who wrote Resident Evil 3, originally wrote this, and his progenitor backstory was they found a fossilized human on this island, which apparently gave you superhuman powers, and I think it was meant to be revealed that Spencer was 100 years old or something.
Yeah.
But I much prefer what they went with in Resident Evil 5, to be honest, with the plant.
Yeah, everything about Resident Evil 5, the actual narrative was fantastic.
It's a shame they didn't make more of it with the plant in 5, but you would have thought that as the precursor to all the other silly viruses that have ever been found, you'd have think it would be like the Holy Grail to research further onto.
Yeah, the files sell that quite well with Marcus.
Within 5, but I would have thought going onwards, that's the only thing I would say. I'm surprised Wesker didn't want to ensure that if he had an endless supply of Ouroboros, he could harness the progenitor virus, and
Yeah.
That's the only thing I would have thought. And even the C virus, if they're making lots of C virus, its base is still progenitor at the end of the day.
Well, I suppose once he perfected Ouroboros, though, he didn't need progenitor anymore. And I don't know if the C virus has progenitor in it or not. I don't know if it's just a mixture of the T Veronica and the G virus. I'm not really an expert on the innards of the viruses.
But both of them, of course, are still based on the progenitor. So it's the raw material almost of these viruses, and I'd have thought it would have. But yeah, I like where I like where it went with that.
Going back to Lost in Nightmares, I mean, we talk about hardcore fans and what they want, and I think a lot of us are easily pleased, because as soon as you start reading them files and you get mentions back to James Marcus and Edward Ashford, and
it's not even on that level, as I was saying when we first started talking about it. I mean, just the intro has that style. It takes you straight back to at that stage took you back straight back to the remake. There's playful kind of dialogue between Chris and Jill about being back in Raccoon City 8 years earlier. Just those alone, just that dialogue kind of helps set up a tone as well. And those files only continue to add to it. There's an entire atmosphere there that Capcom should be taking notice of for other games, because if they released an entire game in that style, I'd love to play it.
It's just a shame there was so much cut dialogue, which you can hear online if you search on YouTube.
You can. What about the Blobs? No, that was a quiz question last week, or the Guardians of Insanity. Again, bit of a mystery about them. We don't know what they are. They look to have G-Virus traits. They are mutated and ill-tempered. Sorry, Austin Powers. And I just wondered, I think with this, I mean, we've often talked about the kind of over-the-shoulder camera angle, and whether actually the kind of traditional zombie haunted mansion situation can work with bog standard zombies. That hasn't happened yet, but it did work very well with quite an overpowered baddie, such as the Blobs.
They have a look of Lisa Trevor to me.
Yeah.
So I think just endless progenitor experiments.
Part of why that worked as well is the environments that are chosen are quite enclosed, but they have kind of multiple paths within the small environment, so you can kind of backtrack and try and escape, or you basically feel like you kind of, it's the nemesis effect. You're constantly being hunted, but at least you've got a little bit of open space to play with, but you're not too much that it feels too easy.
If you play it on professional and they start chasing you around the mansion section, is really good.
I wonder if anyone's played. I haven't played it, but Alien Isolation, is it a similar sort of effect?
Oh, that's absolutely
phenomenal.
Brilliant.
That game.
It's awesome. Absolutely awesome.
It's so hard.
But it's for the first time since, I don't know,
ever.
Probably the Ridley Scott's original film, that creature is scary again.
Hey?
It has got an easy mode, I think. You'll be alright.
Oh, dear. So I think you're right. It's clearly a nod to Lisa Trevor, and I think if Lisa Trevor was permanently stalking you around the mansion in Resident Evil, it would be quite difficult to overcome. At the same time, it also it kind of harkened back to Crimson Heads as well, adding that kind of different element to the mansion. I mean, you do get some zombies, don't you, in Lost in Nightmares, just in the cells, but they're not really much of a challenge.
Yeah, like the emaciated humans.
Yes, yeah, they're barely alive / dead. So I wonder if they ever take on board perhaps the popularity of Lost in Nightmares amongst fans and the recent success of Remake, whether they would actually, if they wanted to do a kind of haunted mansion type setting again, claustrophobic, whether they would be forced to have quite slow, cumbersome but overpowered enemies rather than just zombies that usually take 2 to 3 hits. Just to try and up the ante, up the scare factor and the kind of claustrophobic feel.
I think, in fairness to Capcom, though, with this particular DLC, they were restricted in certain respects because of the story placement. Because I suppose you could have had another T-virus outbreak at the mansion and had zombies running around, but that would have been a bit cliched.
And why is Spencer hanging around in this mansion by himself with a bunch of zombies outside that just end up?
I mean, obviously they needed to have some enemies. And I think
they do have the guards that Wesker's killed.
Yeah, I think what they came up with is quite good, because I think they don't even appear in the mansion, do they not? Unless you're playing in at least hard mode.
Yeah, well, at least one of them turns up
in veteran.
In veteran. Yeah.
Usually around the piano room, I think he appears.
Yeah.
And the other thing was the ammo level as well is at a perfect level to the difficulty. Like, there's just enough if you play correctly on certain difficulties. Like, the balance is really good.
Yeah.
And it makes use of like the melee attack that you have quite well, because if you knock them enough or hit them in their weak spot on the back, then they will drop to the knee, giving you an extra hit with not having to use ammo, but it's not a hugely powerful, it's just an extra hit basically.
Yeah, I was just going to make the point again about the ammo and just the fact that you had quite a few difficulty levels with it as well. So, you could just match your own preference that way. And I remember thinking in hard mode, you really have to think, and it really is quite a challenge with the limited ammo to complete the game, to kill all the blobs as well, and to complete the game on hard mode.
It's good though, as you say. It makes you think. How much ammo have I got left? Even with 2 players as well. You're constantly thinking, and as I said, that takes you back to the good old days, pre-Resident Evil 4, where sadly in Resident Evil 4 you didn't even think about ammo.
And obviously the blobs are a one-hit kill, aren't they? So you've got to keep an eye on your AI partner as well, which adds an extra element.
I think that was quite good of partner use. more so than perhaps even Zero, which just got a bit frustrating at the end of the day. But yeah, I think that worked quite well, because obviously Jill, or whoever you played as, did fight back and did help. But as you said, because it is a one-hit kill, it's something extra to think about as you're going through, making sure they're up to date on health and things like that.
So, I just thought, I won't go on about it, but I just really thought that the way that combat was structured with the blobs in the sewers, was, to me, is just how Resident Evil combat should be. For all those that love their weapons, you're thinking about what guns to use and what ammos to use, but it's not quite straightforward, and it's really unnerving. Luring them under those spiked blocks and then having to get out of the way, and obviously they color coded the cranks, so you have to think about your route and your strategy. And I just can't believe they didn't utilize that just general principle for combat in other Resident Evil games.
It's great if you play it without the map. You get a really tense survival horror experience. If you play it with the map, you get a horror version of Pac-Man. It's awesome.
Without the map, do you still get the audio clue that they're following you? Because it makes
you do. Yeah, you do.
Okay. We've got the a lot of the files are, Batman mentioned earlier, about mentions of the original founders, Marcus, Bailey, and Edward Ashford as well.
For DLC, I was just really blown away just playing it again tonight, just reminding me, and the references to to a young Marcus, and from Spencer's school days, and just so many back references that I was never expecting.
One nice little twist I liked on Spencer's character, I think I mentioned this before, is the way he's spent his entire career backstabbing people and killing his friends, but when it comes to his butler, his loyal butler who's been with him for 60 years, he just decides to just let him go. I thought that was quite a really nice little touch.
I remember reading that and going, wow, he didn't kill him? Or demise him in the basement? Or test him on something?
I was wondering about a mistranslation, because I was reading that file this evening, and it's all very abrupt, because one minute Spencer, in desperation, is using the butler as his number 2 head researcher, and then I think, is it the next letter you read, and suddenly he's just totally dispensed with him without any reason given. I don't know if that's around the time that Spencer then decides to make contact with Albert.
I think it is, yeah, because he asked, I think Patrick's last task was to sort of find Albert and let him know where the mansion was.
Let him know, but don't let him know specifically.
Yeah.
Do you think Spencer was thinking about the dangers and what might happen with Albert turning up, and almost for his own good, his one act of humanity towards someone was to let the butler go for his own safety?
Yeah, potentially, yeah. Because I think Spencer was so embittered with people betraying him, and you've got this one guy who's been with him his entire life and been fiercely 100% loyal. And it's just like, yeah, off you go.
We touched on it earlier. I think one of the biggest questions was how important was Umbrella to Spencer throughout. Obviously, in Wesker's report too, we had that kind of, the questioning over his motives. And you just said about people backstabbing him. At what point did he? I mean, the file suggests that he kind of gave up after Raccoon City went. And then, he still says in the cutscenes that everything was lost with Raccoon City. But then I've always asked myself, what was lost in Raccoon City?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's changed over the years, and we've got numerous sources from loads of different books saying that the whole point of Umbrella being formed was to camouflage the progenitor virus research.
Yeah.
And the files in the latter half of Resident Evil 5 seem to indicate that Spencer, he doesn't really care about Umbrella. It's all about preserving the secret of the progenitor virus and that research. And I think when he said all was lost in Raccoon City, I think he means the
cover.
Yeah, the potential for the Wesker progenitor research to continue rather than the work Umbrella was doing.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, he still cared about things like the G-Virus and that, but I think his personal goal about creating this race of superhumans was what he was wanting. And Umbrella was, the way he was going to become this god. And when Raccoon City happened, he knew the company was dead. And
so why did he keep on Sergei on his books, essentially, to try and keep everything alive and quickly go get the Red Queen and do ABC?
Well, that was obviously before Raccoon City, wasn't it?
Getting the Red Queen was, but,
obviously, I think he wanted to do what he could to revive Umbrella, because like I said, Umbrella was the key to creating this virus that he wanted and creating this evolved human race. And we've had games like Dead Aim and Wesker's Extra Report, which hints at the revival plan they were doing with the TG virus and the bow auctions on the ships to raise money, and the Talos program. But once all that failed, there was no way back. that's when Spencer turned from Umbrella to Alex Wesker.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially after Raccoon. A month later, Tyrant production plant, which could yield out, potential BOWs to sell to the world over, that went up.
Yeah.
Another semi-betrayal, if you like, by Vincent. And then, as you said, the other kind of random incidents, which I think because of 5 felt very much part of the storyline without any mention of them. Everything kind of got, finished up quite nice, that kind of story arc of Umbrella, Wesker, Spencer. It ended, and I think that's the saving grace of Resident Evil 5. The storyline was so much better than everything else, and it kind of set it up for basically a reboot after 5. And the reboot was, as many people would have thought, this kind of Wesker Children program, but sadly it has not yet materialised, but may do now.
Well, like I said before, I think it's purely an insurance policy they took out at the time in case they didn't know where to go next. And the succession of one-off standalone stories we've had, and the fact that they've brought in Wesker's son suggests that they're desperately trying to cling on to this character.
That's the thing with kind of Jake Mueller, although his whole conception is tosh. His character was actually quite. By the end of the game, I actually thought he was quite a cool character. Anyway.
Well, I just think it's not really his fault. It was more the fact of what it could have been. If it hadn't have been for the Wesker Children file, then I don't think too many people would have had a problem actually with Jake.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
As you so eloquently put, a missed opportunity. Okay, so we've had a quick file on there. Is there anything anyone wanted to discuss about the perhaps the mansion itself? Some of the Easter eggs that we get?
Moonlight Sonata was fantastic.
Yes.
And just the little extra things with the atmosphere that, again, I just felt so lacking in games since, with just the whole atmosphere of Resident Evil 5 and 6. That survival horror, mystery, you get the door that just suddenly bursts open, which I think is a bit like there's the Hookman gameplay from 3.5. And just the fact that when you go back into the dining room, you can hear the piano playing and the sound effects.
Even the zombie just falling off the top of the main stairs makes you jump.
Yes.
Yeah, it's brilliant, Mo. You weren't expecting that, and works very well.
It's a bat, isn't it? That flies through, that smashes through the window.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You can hear the dogs barking, can't you?
Yeah.
And you can hear one of the blobs scraping their axe along the floor from somewhere upstairs.
Yeah.
Actually, if you play it in with a really good surround system, the amount of atmospheric audio that you can hear is really impressive.
Yep.
It's often missed on a stereo mix.
I like the design of the mansion as well. It was familiar, but it looked different enough, I thought. Quite dilapidated, and it had some nice visual things like the black and white photos of the African dig, and the pictures of the woman with the face scratched out. And
I did think it was a better homage to the Spencer mansion than what Code Veronica did.
Yeah.
That felt. I mean, I know it's quite an old game now, but that felt very sterile.
Yeah.
And completely unnecessary, to be brutally honest.
Yeah. Not George Trevor's finest work.
No, it wasn't.
No. But going actually what Bat said, I really agree with that. In some respects, it was so similar to the mansion, to the Spencer mansion, but very different in parts. So it was distinct. It stands alone in itself. It has its own kind of personality.
Yeah.
And it's such a shame there weren't more rooms to investigate.
I mean, you can almost imagine Spencer saying to George Trevor, he said, right, I want it to look like this, and, describing his European mansion. I want the new mansion in Raccoon Forest to look like this, so it'll look like my old home.
And we also got a recreation of the Keeper's Diary, the Keeper's Diary coming back.
Yeah, that's the only implausible file, really.
Yeah.
Did he do it a photocopy?
I was trying to think today, playing that of all sorts of kind of theories, but they're all just so ridiculously fantastical. As to why, was he the keeper? Just trying to think, why would it be there?
I could have understand, because obviously got the star crests that you hidden around the mansion that you find, and I could have understood if they were linked to like copies of old important files throughout the history of this franchise that kind of helped bring people in who maybe didn't know the backstories too much, and that was like one of them, and they'd all been linked. That would have made sense to me, but as a gameplay thing, but the way they did it doesn't make any sense at all.
It kind of suggests that as Spencer was fleeing the Spencer Mansion in Raccoon City, he found this diary and go, "Oh, that's nice. We'll have that."
He just ignored the zombies that were around, completely.
Maybe it was some sort of evidence in the keeper's kind of case against him, like some employment tribunal of unlawful dismissal.
But before I go, I'll quickly go to my Xerox and photocopy it and then put it back.
We could take the plausibility that one of the STARS members picked it up while they were in the mansion, and it was used as evidence against the case against Umbrella in Raccoon City, and he got a copy of it, and it turned.
Brian Irons got it before he died. Mailed it back.
Well, maybe Umbrella's investigation teams found it in the rubble of the mansion and gave it to Spencer, and Spencer sits in his bed reading it every night thinking, fuck, May the 11th, 1998, that's when my plans were ruined.
The second section of the game obviously focused on the underground prison and the courtyard, and I for one felt that the underground prison was quite a cool area, and kind of took the idea of what you see in Rockfort and put it to a whole new dinginess, and very atmospheric.
Bringing this to Revelations 2, I think it's still better than the version that they're putting in Revelations 2, which is about to come out. As I was talking about in the preview I played, which is a prison, on this island, and it's dingy, but it's kind of hard to describe. It's it's a cliche dingy. It's not
genuine enough.
It's not genuine enough. The prison that's there feels like it was a functioning prison that's degraded over time because it's been buried underneath this manor, and it's just used for what it's used for. And there's a big difference. Just like the other one's trying too hard to be dingy.
Like in Revelations 2, is there a purpose why there's so many bodies hanging from the ceiling on those hooks?
I don't understand it. I don't.
Is it just dramatic effect?
I think it is, but I didn't understand it when I played it, a couple of weeks back, and I'm probably not going to understand it when I play the final version. This
is what we like though as fans. We like to know why that's there, even if it's just a passing. Like in Code Veronica, you got the prisoner diaries. The Prisoner's Diary. That filled in so many blanks without actually having to...
I will say that it's probably... I think, as I said, there's one file I came across that kind of explained that there was people that they were testing, or implied that there was going to be testing on these people. So there's probably going to be some explanation about what they were doing with the people in the prison and why the various enemies are like they are. But I don't know if that'll specifically explain why they're hanging from the ceiling in any particular reason, other than that looks cool.
That would be a terrible shame. I think Nick was talking about it on a past podcast. As you say, this is what we really liked, particularly about Remake, the way that you could interact with your environment and really connect with the game. And when you weren't running about shooting, you could take a moment's breath and listen to the atmospheric music and read some of the descriptions. And I mean, with the Spencer Mansion, read about George Trevor, someone else's path through the mansion, and giving you some idea as to the horrors that awaited you when you followed this similar path. So when you see things like those bodies hanging, you think, oh, fantastic, there's going to be a file that's going to give you the history of those people and how they got there. But no, if it's just been put there for effect, I think that's going to be a terrible shame.
But it'd be nice that perhaps if they can't be bothered to do that, they could even address it. I think one of the biggest losses in the series has been the ability to, as you said, to interact with static elements within the game. So you could just look at a random painting that no one's ever looked at, and you look at it and it will say, this is a painting of a big castle, it looks very posh. It's so pointless or something, but it does help with the atmosphere. And so if in Revelations you're able to if you were able to click on the bodies, so to speak, and say, oh my god, how did this get here? At least there's a kind of in-universe no explanation, as opposed to a complete no explanation, if you know what I mean.
Well, I was going to say, that's the one thing, I mean, Lost in Nightmares as well gets that idea right of, the calm before the storm, there's this quiet spot before the enemies turn up, and you get to explore, but it's missing that element of being able to check everything as well.
Yes, yeah.
And if that had been put in there, that would have been perfect. It honestly would have made up that little bit of difference. But that's, again, something that the newer games just don't get. And I've seen the comments in some of the reviews already saying that the Revelations 2 is relentless in its aspects. It's that same style that was in the last one. So I don't think it's going to give us much reprieve. And unlike Lost in Nightmares, unlike the original games, which gave us a little bit of a balance between when enemies turned up at certain points or before they turned up, and it's that scene setting that's so important.
You just want to be able to want not to play it. You don't want to play it because you're going, I don't know what's going to happen next, or I want to try and preserve my ammo. You don't want the fast pacedness of it because it all goes so quickly. You're just never in an area, and that was my biggest criticism of Resident Evil 5, that you're never in an area long enough to really appreciate what the hell was going on.
The sense of dread, basically, the idea that you don't want to. Do I want to progress forward?
Yes.
Do I want to peek out from behind the blanket to see what's next?
Yeah.
Like, that's the idea.
I think you do get that in the prison in Lost in Nightmares, because you've gone through the mansion, which is largely empty, and suddenly you're in this prison, there's bodies everywhere, and you know this place isn't going to be empty.
Replaying Resident Evil 4, actually, quite a while ago, I did find that actually that the whole village section, because there's a lot of backtracking with the village, you went through different areas to get back to the same place. I felt that there was that element just about there of the exploration. You could go back.
But that's the reason why the setup to Resident Evil 4 worked reasonably well as well, is because you come in, there's the opening scene, you walk into the village, there's one guy attacks you, then there's the occasional person as you make your way down the path before the village attack happens.
Yeah.
And it kind of leads itself to that unsettling feeling slowly growing. But the rest of the game doesn't have that same sort of pace. Once that village scene happens, you explore an area, and then it's kind of like a bottleneck kind of thing again. You get to a certain point, a bunch of enemies are thrown at you. You go through a few things, you do a puzzle, then a bunch of enemies are thrown at you. So
I think 4 totally loses it in the
Castle. You've always, you're quite a strong advocate of the, or not an advocate if you like, of the giant Salazar and all that rubbish. I do think though that. I wonder if the game should bring back ink ribbons. When you die in Resident Evil, isn't that something more frustrating than knowing that you haven't saved for a long time? But that was part of its charm.
My issue with this now is that same concept that everyone was complaining about last time about microtransactions and lives. People will end up paying for extra saves.
Dear God.
They'll find some way to go, we'll make them so limited that we can potentially see people buying extra saves in their game.
I always found the ink ribbon concept, again, it was linked directly to that kind of dread aspect that you just talked about, Rumby, with do I want to go forward? You know what, I'm quite happy here for the moment. I'll save, and I don't want to go ahead, because if I die, if God knows what is through that door and I'm dead, Hunter kills me in one, I'm going to be annoyed.
And everyone will have had that time where they didn't have an ink ribbon, and you've made quite a bit of progress, and you're like, shit, if I die now, I'm going to lose so much.
That always takes me back to one of the first times I ever played the original on PlayStation. I didn't even have a memory card, so I couldn't save even if I had an ink ribbon. I was like, nah. And of course, it took me ages to finish the game because of that. And then I think I actually bought a memory card before I actually finished the game, because it was that hard. But it was that same dread was still there. But I mean, there's the classic. Was it Okamoto that talked about the ink ribbon hunting game? Yeah, how he never liked the ink ribbon idea, but it does add to that dread element, because if you don't have enough ink ribbons, then you go, have I made enough progress? I need to find an ink ribbon, but to find an ink ribbon, I might have to go through some areas with some more enemies, and it's
that combined with I want to try and get a good score as well.
Or I'm trying to get through the game as fast as possible so I can get the unlimited rocket launcher or the bonus things, or a good grade so I can unlock the bonus extras. Those sorts of things.
Maybe as a compromise, rather than ink ribbons, they could just bring back save rooms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. You don't physically
rather than
keep ink
checkpoints.
ribbons. Yeah. Ideally, have a save room with typewriters that you can physically save. You don't necessarily need ink ribbons, because you always had more. You should normally have enough.
I can't remember. Can you tell me how far between, kind of roughly, in the last Revelations, the checkpoint system was? Like, was it every few minutes that it basically saved? You went through a couple of rooms? Because I can't honestly remember.
I don't remember it being too easy. I think they were quite well spaced out.
I don't think you went any further back than like 10 minutes.
It's probably similar to what I experienced in Revelations 2, at least the trial that I undertook. Because one of the times I died and I restarted, I started back at the start of this whole section where I had to go through several rooms again. And I was like, okay, that's a reasonable far distance back. But then again, it might just mean that I was at the point that was the furthest almost away from when the next checkpoint was going to happen anyway. So if I'd not died there, but like maybe in 30 seconds, I would have got to the next checkpoint. That was just luck.
Save rooms, though, only work as a concept if you're in a hub area. This is where 4, 5, 6 Revelations has been wholly different from previous games. Admittedly, 3 didn't quite have a hub area, but you were in an area quite a long time before you did move on to a new set piece.
Yeah, this goes back to what I think you said before. Do you mean it because you're always being pushed forward in whether it's I think it's a 2 linear direction, but whether it's a linear direction or not, you're still always being pushed forward, and you never get to do any backtracking or any kind of appreciation to take in your surroundings or to go into a save room and actually think now. What am I going to do next because I haven't got enough ammunition?
Yeah, there was a potential for that in Revelations because it was mostly, aside from the side chapters that were outside of the ship, confined to that ship. But the thing about it was that most of the chapters, once you went through a door, you couldn't go back until either it let you go back through, or you never went back through. And so they couldn't keep putting save rooms in, but there would have been that potential. They could have had if every so many rooms was a save room and you could go back at any stage, it would have worked. And then the outside chapter stuff could have had just a save room in the one environment that you're in, or 2 save rooms in the environment that you're in, and it would have worked as well.
It runs quite deep because I've never thought of it like that, the way Nick talks about a hub. And you're right, but the only way you're going to get that is if the whole gameplay is structured so that you've got that hub area, say, in the middle, and then to the left and to the right of you, you've got various different rooms and locations that you're aware of, but you can't quite get to them because you have that whole structure where you might find one particular item very early on in the game, or there might be a door very close to you, but you can't get access to that location until you find a particular item completely, in another part of that environment. So you can only have that hub area if you're going to and from it in all various different directions, but kind of passing through it at various points because you're getting one item from one part of the world and you're going across to the other. But if you're constantly always being pushed forward, then any item that you find, you're just going to be using when you get around the corner.
Okay, we are digressing somewhat. What was everyone's view on the actual fight with Wesker?
I think it's one of the weaker points of the DLC, to be honest. I think it could have probably done without it. Because the Wesker fight, the mechanics of it aren't great. I mean, the one where you actually have to do the Sheva, Chris, Jill, Wesker fight isn't so bad because it's like a game of cat and mouse around the corridors. But in an open sort of arena style fight like they give you, it's just not great.
I agree with that. But the funny thing is, and I don't like quick timer events, I really don't, but it actually, honestly, in this case, could have been a quick timer event, and it probably would have made sense. Like, there could have been basic quick time. Like, it could have been a Leon Krauser style cutscene, and with a bunch of multiple parts, and I would have been completely fine with that. It was done in that exact style. I would have been like, totally makes sense, because obviously Chris cannot fight Wesker right now. So him at least avoiding blows and trying to land them would make way more sense.
Is there anything else anyone wanted to bring to the discussion?
Just the bit in the underground tunnels, really, where you're getting chased by the blobs. I thought that was a decent sequence where you lose your weapons.
Yes, that was quite tense, if I remember correctly.
I'm always a little bit bemused by the whole losing the weapon sequence, because usually they're carrying so many massive weapons all the time, and yet they manage to lose everything. It just makes me laugh. It works for the gameplay, but it always makes me laugh a bit.
Yeah.
If people do try it with the map, I strongly suggest you have a go without, because it's a different experience completely.
I kind of was not surprised when the last one always kind of fights back. When you're dropping the...
Oh, yeah.
But I tell you, whenever you got the prompt to go under there and punch him, I was like, I don't want to do that. I'm not going under all them spikes and punching him. What possible benefit's going to happen there?
Can I quickly ask, is there any obvious reason? Would it just be a huge pain in the arse for the developers why they never utilised that idea again of having the choice to go fixed camera? Why that wasn't taken on for an entire game in Resident Evil 6?
Well, I'm going to be controversial. I don't like the camera angles in Resident Evil 5. I think they're nice and nostalgic, but they just completely nullify the aiming.
They do. Oh, yeah, you're right.
And playing through the entire game like that would just be frustrating as hell.
Yeah, I kind of think as an Easter egg, but as a gameplay thing,
I think that's why they only really give you it for the mansion section, though, because you don't need aiming so much there.
The idea could have been refined and probably could be made use of, as an extra camera option for a game, but it would probably require a lot more work. And as I said to someone recently, I can't remember where I said it, but I think now that Capcom's pretty much decided on the Resident Evil 4 style camera angle, unless someone reinvents the wheel on that again, it's not going to change. That's probably what they're going to stick with.
I was going to say, is this the pinnacle, if you like? Is this proof that actually the combination of this over-the-shoulder camera and survival horror can actually work.
I'd be happy with what they planned with the Hookman version, where it's camera angles until you aim. It goes into the over-the-shoulder aiming.
Because they do that with Dead Aim, don't you? Get that with Dead Aim, don't you?
Yeah, in a sense, yeah.
It's innocent.
But can you imagine having fixed camera angles in Resident Evil 6, where you're playing as Chris trying to shoot down a Neo Umbrella helicopter and simultaneously trying to protect Jake and Sherry on the floor as well?
There are a couple of fixed camera angles in Resident Evil 6 here, and they're terrible.
I was actually thinking as well, with Dead Aim just being mentioned there, I was reading a Revelations 2 review about, it's another game that forces an AI partner on you. And every game in the series has, since Dead Aim. Dead Aim was the last game in the series where you were purely solo all the way through. Remarkable.
And I think Revelations 2 is the first game since Dead Aim that doesn't have Chris or Leon in it.
Wow.
I think. If you don't count the Outbreak games, obviously.
Yeah, I was going to say Outbreak is excluded. But of course that's still partner system, obviously, because you've got, if you played it by yourself, you had AI partners, you play it with other people, you play it with other people.
There you go then, Dead Aim.
we always come back.
How long is that? 11 years? 12 years?
2003 it came out.
Yeah.
Just after
12.
0, I think.
So almost 12 years. That's incredible.
But that's an interesting point, though. Why do you have an NPC following you around suddenly? Because Revelations 1 wasn't 2-player, and this one's only offline 2-player, isn't it? So why do you? What is the sudden fascination with having someone following you around for the entire game? Would Revelations 1 have not been better if you didn't have Parker following you around all the time?
The only good thing they did with that was make the partner character invincible, so you didn't have to babysit them.
Yeah,
but I mean, it's still. The problem is, it just takes away all the drama when you've got a character talking to you through the story.
It was the first criticism of Zero, though, wasn't it?
Yeah.
To me, it takes away and adds, because at least at Dynamic, where if you can't click and search every item to get the character's thoughts about what they're looking at, sometimes at least that back and forth dialogue will give you some information about what's going on in the character's head around. But as I said, it's not a substitute, it's just a replacement.
But if you're creating a survival horror game, what's going to be more scary? Going through the prison as Barry on your own, or going through the prison as Barry with a little girl who can see through walls and see where all the enemies are?
This is the same argument that was made when Dead Space went to the 2-player thing for Dead Space 3. It's like the first two, single player co-op, single player game moving to co-op, and it's that same reason was the outcry when Resident Evil 5 went to co-op. Was that same thing? It does take away a lot of the tension and that dread and everything we talked about earlier.
Yeah, but that's the funny thing. Revelations isn't even co-op. Well, the first one wasn't, anyway.
We're going to slightly wrap this up. Final thoughts and conclusions on Lost in Nightmares. Batman.
Just brilliant. As short as it was, it's perfect. I can't really say much more than I already have, so 10 out of 10. Brilliant.
Scores, gone straight for scores there.
How much was it? Was it 400 Microsoft points? I think it was.
About $3.99 on PlayStation.
Yeah. Wow.
Was that just for Lost in Nightmares? What about Desperate Escape?
Yeah,
Desperate Escape was $3.99 as well. Yeah.
And then there was a bundle version, slightly cheaper, and then obviously the disc version.
Yep.
On PS3 had all the DLC included, but not the Xbox version.
And as a piece of DLC, it was perfect because it was completely different to the main game, and was it a year after Resident Evil 5 came out?
It was a year. I think it was either January or February. I think.
Yeah, just under a year. Yeah.
So, it wasn't disc locked content, which has got to be the bane of everyone's life.
No, it did clearly was developed after, because I seem to remember there was an interview with Patricia Jarlee, who voices Jill, halfway, a few months after 5 had been released, and she actually said she'd gone back to re-record some dialogue for the Gold Edition. That's how the news broke, I think. And
there'd obviously been a lot of pressure on Capcom. There's a lot of the disc-locked content had been Capcom's problem for so many games, and so obviously they were kind of, I guess it was some way of proving that not everything had been planned beforehand.
Stars Tyrant, final conclusions and thoughts?
Yeah, one of the last truly great original things in the series, if not the last real sort of good slice of Biohazard. And it actually gets better every time you play it, I think. I think it does improve. Whether that's just nostalgia, desperately trying to, grab hold of you, but it's a 10.
George Trevor?
Just what everyone said. I just causes me equal amounts of delight and confusion. I think it was the last great installment in the series. I think Capcom got everything absolutely right with this, how they could have progressed the series forward, and I just don't understand why they didn't take from this game so much of what they got right.
Score?
9 out of 10. I would have given it 10 out of 10 if there'd been more areas to explore, because that's the only fault I can give it. It's just an incredible DLC, fantastic, great atmosphere, perfect combination of combat and puzzle.
Romby?
I don't know if I can add much more. I mean, I agree. It should have been a blueprint for moving forward, both in the fact that it had set up a potential future content as far as story went, and also took a great gameplay system that could have and probably still could work pretty well, especially in the face of how well the HD version of the remake's been received. This might be the good middle ground. Yeah, it's great piece of DLC.
Any score?
I'm going to say 9 as well.
Does anyone have a favourite moment they want to quickly share with the community?
I would say it's just being in the mansion section, having the little anecdotes which don't feel forced in this case. They just feel like loving homages. And probably Jill playing the piano. For me, it just worked because they used the Moonlight Sonata for the trailer, and I think that was like what made me really sit up and go like, oh, this is going to be good.
Anyone else?
I love going into the dining room. I think is it for the second time when you then hear the piano mysteriously playing again. Just that makes you feel real dread.
I like logging onto the computer in the study, and it plays that little jingle from the very first game.
Yes, the old login music. Great. Well, unless anyone has anything else they want to finally add, I think that finishes off our discussion on Lost in Nightmares. But I'm pleased to say that we've had a few call-ins this week. Oh yes. So we have the first one has come from Project Umbrella member Yoke. So if we let's hit his record and see what he wants to say.
Morning, Yoke here. So, Lost in Nightmares. This is honestly my favorite part of Resident Evil 5. It is just an amazing throwback to the first game, and I'm not going to talk about all the similarities. I'm sure you guys have already covered it, and if I cover it, it'd just be too long of a call-in. It just pretty much boils down to, if it's a memorable moment, it's probably in this. I do like the nod to Resident Evil 3.5, though. It just makes you think about what could have been. Now, I honestly don't know where to start. The few files we get are great. We get a better look at Spencer's mental state, looking at the virus he was trying to make, files from Patrick talking about the founders and the decline of Spencer, more information on the Wesker children, but most importantly, that another Wesker is alive. With the upcoming release of Revelations 2, Alex seems to be on everyone's mind. It's really odd how a character mentioned in a file in this DLC can get all this buzz. It really shows how popular Wesker was as a villain. And kind of a little rant, I hate how we have to refer to Wesker as Albert now. It really bugs me. And to go on to the Revelations 2 topic, I hope it's Alex. I hope she doesn't die in this game. Too many villains have been dying. We need a constant villain. And now there's a rumor that Trisul is in Revelations 2, but they're gone. It's doesn't look too good for the villains. As for what I think she'll be doing, she's a Wesker. Ouroboros seems to be involved, so I'm going to be really shocked if she isn't trying to saturate something. Anyway, back to Lost in Nightmares. I really like the gameplay, mainly how the blobs appear depending on what difficulty you're playing on and what you did. By the way, I've never been more disappointed in a monster's name. They really should have stuck with Guardians of Insanity or Keepers of Madness. Now, there are a couple things I didn't like about the game, or the DLC. I honestly hate anything that gives a bullshit reason for why they took your weapons away. It's just, really, you fell in shallow water and you lost everything. I know you really wanted the player to use traps, but it's not like you had that much ammo left. But my main problem is, and I know this is a DLC, I just wish it was longer. I wanted to explore more of the place. I felt so sad that I couldn't follow Wesker's path of destruction or explore the dungeons and possibly find, Spencer's lab or something. It just leaves more to be desired. Well, that's pretty much a summary of what I thought about it. Hopefully this was of some use to you guys. And, before I go, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you guys a question. I've seen a few comments before saying how people didn't really like Lost in Nightmares, mainly because of the fan service, like, adding in the Keeper's Diary, which is out of place. Do any of you guys feel this way? Alright, thanks again. Bye.
So an interesting comment there from Yoke. I think he detailed a lot of what we discussed about the removal of weapons being an annoying factor, but he obviously touched on what you said, George, about it being a bit short. But his question there was whether or not people were saying that they didn't like it because of some aspects to do with the Keeper's Diary and things like that.
Well, I think apart from the Keeper's Diary, which obviously is, to say it was shoehorned in is an understatement. But apart from that, I actually think the nods to the mansion worked really well. I don't think they were just blatant kind of plagiarism or just shoehorned in. I think they were similar, but they kind of worked well on their own within the environment of Lost in Nightmares.
I was just going to say, I think the fact that there is repetition in the locations is a reoccurring theme through the series, though, isn't it? Code Veronica sort of introduced that notion that labs were built with similar features and whatnot. So
I think everyone probably would have complained if at the end, after Jill disappeared out the window, Chris went off and found a triggering device and blew the mansion up. Then you might be like, yeah, okay, there's a bit of real serious repetition going on.
And then Wesker's body was found unconscious in the power room. But I mean, I was going to say, as I said before, with the files, if there had been extra files hidden to the stars around that you shoot, and because it ties into the whole, there's the files and the menus in Resident Evil 5 that tell you the history of Resident Evil, and they still come up when the game's loading for the DLC, but those would only add to real proper, probably overkill fan service. But at the same time, I think they also appeal to potentially people who don't know the backstory too much, to give them more details on certain files and stuff. It's like how the EX files were to the Nintendo 64 version of Resident Evil 2. It added for people who had never played a Resident Evil title before or hadn't played for a long time. I think if you were being really harsh, you could maybe say the Moonlight Sonata, Jill playing the piano, was a bit...
I did think a lot of it did feel organic, though.
Yeah.
It felt it suited the environment, and apart from the Keeper's Diary, which didn't make any sense within its context and location.
Would have been interesting to see what sort of comments were made if there'd been an actual old style Resident Evil puzzle in there, because the way the game works is it's still got the mechanics of 5, which is that you go to this location, you pick up the very basic item, and you gather the bits up, and that works fine, and it works fine for the DLC as well. I don't have any problem with it, but perhaps that would have been a real serious complaint for a lot of people, especially after playing Resident Evil 5. Oh, what? I have to work this puzzle, I have to push these statues around and gather up this item rather than just picking it up. Oh, what a pain in the ass.
Yeah, I think.
What is it with this guy in Crags?
He makes a good point as well about how we all have to call Wesker Albert now, because it does sound weird.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Yoke. Thank you, Yoke, for your call. That was very great for you to do so, and hopefully we've answered your question. And any more you want to call in, by all means. Okay, we have a second call in from our regular call in contributor, Vito.
Lost in Nightmares, one of the few DLCs out there that they're actually downloadable content and not disc locked content. I hope that dies one day, honestly. It was released almost 1 year after Resident Evil 5, and it was actually a great DLC. It was amazing going back into a mansion and having a little bit of that atmosphere from Remake in there. The monsters were great. The dialogue was also good. The files, oh my god, the files were amazing. These are the kind of files I want in a Resident Evil game. They enrich the story, the backstory, and they give hints of future plot lines in the series. I really hope Revelations 2 has files of this quality. I really do. The only negative I can think of the DLC is it's too short. I think I beat it in 90 minutes, or less. Well, it's really short, but it's sweet. Really sweet. I hope you guys explain this in the podcast, but to this day I still don't understand why the hell Spencer calls Wesker to the mansion. Why? Does he really have a death wish? Or there is something more in there? I never really understood that. Well, now, speaking of Revelations 2, I'm gonna be blunt here. The game looks like shit. It may play better, but holy shit, it looks bad. The only thing I'm looking for in the game is the story. That's it. If the story is good, I'm happy, I'm satisfied. Since obviously it's a low budget game, but still, come on Capcom, a little more effort please. And I guess that's everything I have to say. Toodles.
Thank you, Vito. always an input. Obviously, Vito's in the same camp as you, Romby, with your questioning over Spencer's call to have him back.
I just don't get it. Like, I mean, I do get it in a narrative sense, but I just think that obviously he's frail and old, and Wesker's probably just going to kill him. And so sending off these people, except for these bodyguards, like, what was he expecting, like, to happen? I don't honestly think he was going to win him back.
Yeah, I just think it was the last throw of the dice. Because if I remember right, there's one of Spencer's files. He talks about his last hope is his butler. And then suddenly out of the blue, the next thing you read is the butler's been dispensed with. So I don't know, something specific happened. But yeah, I just think it was literally that or die alone. His last connection with the work that he was trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think he was just literally beyond desperation that Wesker would help him finish his plan. There's one thing we didn't touch on, actually. Well, I think it's in Resident Evil 5 in the cutscene, isn't it? That Spencer tells Wesker that he is the last of the Wesker children, and he doesn't mention Alex at all.
Oh, yes.
Well, I was just thinking, maybe did he think that there was some way he could get that Wesker might know of Alex's whereabouts, or he might have, I don't know, tried to enlist Wesker in find. Maybe he thought that in telling Wesker about the Wesker children, he might want to find the others. But then, as you say, he never mentions Alex.
Well, this is what's interesting me about Revelations 2, because if Ouroboros is in it, then where's it come from? Because Resident Evil 5, to me anyway, lends the impression that apart from Wesker, Excella, Irving, and some researchers from Trisol Africa, nobody else knew about Ouroboros, apart from the BSAA. So where's it come from?
Well, so this is the thing I was interested in, is that opening cutscene where they show members from TerraSave going in to help in the village, that there might be some link there as well. That this whole idea of them going into the village is that somewhere in the background some shady dealings going on, but that may be just expecting too much. Like it might be something far more simple that comes out of it.
I would like TerraSave to actually stay a relatively non-corrupt organisation. That would be a a fresh approach.
I'm just worried because the whole setup relies on the fact they're at a TerraSave event and then they will get like kidnapped and stuff, like, and killed.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit worrying that maybe there's already someone inside the. I mean, maybe it's not, but you know.
I mean, I have no proof of this, but for me, if you just watch the intro, it's clear that Neil Fisher guy is evil.
But they've done that. I mean, they've done that with Frederick Downing, with Will Farmer, and to an extent, Revelations with the FBC as well. You know, it's like
this is the same problem that you were talking about with having these throwaway villains. It's the same term. It's their throwaway organizations as well.
Yeah.
Like we create this organization, and then next time it comes up, it's either disbanded or evil or being thrown away in some silly way. Sorry, I was just going to say one last thing as well. Like, when I was thinking about Lost in Nightmares, I think it was the last time, and I know it sounds really horrible because I am sitting here talking about these games in depth, but I think it was the last time that I actually cared deeply about the franchise. I'm being serious. Like, if Revelations 2 does actually end up tying into all this sort of stuff, I will be both amazed, obviously, but be really like excited to see that, because since then it has been quite a convoluted kind of mess because of these sort of organisations that are throwaway, these events and then villains that are throwaway. That that's why I didn't play the first Revelations till it came out in HD, because I didn't care enough. Like, I was like, the story sounds like it's. I saw a little bit of what the story was going to be, and I thought, I can play this later. I'm not fast. And that's how I've kind of felt about the story, I think. And so if these sorts of things do become true, then maybe, it will rekindle my interest in the story side of things a lot more.
I think you speak for a majority of the fan base there.
Well, I think that concludes all our discussions on Lost in Nightmares. Thank you, everyone, for your call-in. And without further ado, we'll now move on to this week's edition of Neptune's Biohazard Quiz.
New format. New questions. And new challenges. Each broadcast, a new quiz to test the resolve. Welcome to Neptune's Biohazard Quiz!
So hello and welcome to Neptune's Biohazard Quiz. It's a different style of quiz this week. Very slightly different, very, very slightly different. So unnoticeable, you probably won't even think it's much of a difference. But the questions are very easy, so do not panic, do not fear.
I'm feeling real pressure. That's like the fourth time you've mentioned how easy the questions.
We've got, as usual, 5 questions, plus we've got a bonus question 6. In this particular quiz, it's an odd one out. So question 6 will be, which of your 5 answers is the odd one out? There is a connection running through all 5, but obviously one of them is phony. So can you identify that connection? Okay. I will tell you now that the connection can be in-universe or even out of universe. So an example would be that perhaps all 5 answers, or 4 answers in this case, they've all appeared. They've all appeared in a particular game, or they've all had file references in a particular game, or perhaps all surnames of all the people that you've answered are also presidents of the United States of America. It could be as diverse as that, gentlemen. Okay. So that's what you've got to think of. All 5 questions, the actual answers are only worth half a mark each because they're so easy. But you've got to think what is connecting your answers. But we'll go through the same format, asking the 5 questions, and then we'll see what everyone's got. So if everyone can clear their desktops, you can open up Notepad. Let's go with question number 1. What was the name of Helena's sister in Resident Evil 6?
God. Shit.
Question number 2. Who was the captain of the SRT in Harvardville? That's degeneration, by the way, George. Yep. Question 3. Now you've got to listen to this. I am thin enough to fit through the ventilation shaft and escape the RPD. And of course, anyone who knows me knows, of course, I'm that thin. So I'm thin enough to fit through the ventilation shaft and escape the RPD. Who am I? Question number 4. Which Umbrella employee steals Yoko's ID card?
Can you just repeat that?
Yeah, sure. Which Umbrella employee steals Yoko's ID card?
I knew that series playthrough would come in handy one day.
Absolutely. And question number 5. If I was to say that my sweet ass was on its way, who am I talking about?
Mark Thompson.
Yeah. And of course, question number 6 would be, which is the odd one out / what is the connection? So, I'll give you time to think. Join us after this when we'll run through the answers. Yes, welcome back. Let's see how everyone's done. I expect everyone should be getting very close to maximum marks. So, question number 1 was, what was the name of Helena's sister in Resident Evil 6? George Trevor, what did you put?
Jessica.
Okay. Batman?
Deborah Harper.
Oh, shit.
Star Starrent?
Deborah Harper.
Romby?
Deborah, yeah.
Correct, very good. So, half a mark there. Question number 2, who was the captain of the SRT in Harvardville? Romby?
No clue.
Star Starrent?
I didn't know this, I'm afraid.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm not aware of this answer.
George Trevor?
No idea.
Oh, Batman?
Angela Miller.
Angela Miller.
She's the captain, isn't she?
Is the correct answer.
Bastard.
Very good. Well done, Bat. Well done, Bat. Okay, so question number 3 was, I'm thin enough to fit through the ventilation shaft and escape the RPD. Who am I? This is an Outbreak question. George Trevor.
Oh, shit. I was going to say Sherry Birkin.
Hey, it's true. I could.
I suppose it's not wrong, but it's not the answer I was looking for. But, although you would argue that the ventilation shaft is not accessible to Sherry Birkin. So you've gone for Sherry Birkin. Batman, who did you go for?
I'm glad you said it was an Outbreak question, because I was going to say Sherry. They can all fit through the vent in Outbreak.
They can, but there's a comment in a cutscene.
Oh, Christ. Rita.
Rita, okay. Stars Tyrant, who are you going to say?
Yeah, I'd put Sherry down, so I'll stick with that.
Romby?
Yeah, I'd put Sherry down because I didn't think about Break at all.
It was very good. It was Rita, so very good. Well done, Batman.
Well, I technically said Sherry as well.
Did you?
I only changed my mind when you mentioned Outbreak.
Oh, okay, then you won't get the point. Okay, fair enough. But yes, the answer was Rita.
Bastard.
Question number 4. Which Umbrella employee steals Yoko's ID card? I'll come Batman last because he seemed fairly confident. Romby?
Monica?
Stars Tyrant?
I only know Monica, I don't know her surname.
And George Trevor?
The only bit I knew was that this is an Outbreak question.
Yes, it was.
That's as far as I can go.
Okay.
I don't know.
You did know. Batman?
Monica.
Is the correct answer, so half points all round there, except for George, sadly. And I think he should get a point here. Question number 5 was, if I was to say that my sweet ass was on its way, who am I talking about? Batman?
Jessica.
Surname?
Sharawat.
Star Starrant?
Jessica Shawat. That's what I've got.
Romby?
Oh, I just wrote Jessica, so...
And George?
I actually just had Jessica.
That's fine. Yes, points all round there. Well done. So let's quickly rack up the scores after we get to question number 5, because question number 6, the link, is worth more points. So Batman, you finished on 2 points. Bear in mind they're only worth half, so you got 4. Stars Tyrant 1.5, Romby 1.5, and George half. Now, one of these answers is the odd one out, and you'll get 1 point if you can tell me which is the odd one out, and 2 points if you can tell me the connection.
Can you read out the answers again?
Yes, I can. So question number 1 was Deborah Harper. The answer to question number 2 was Angela Miller. The answer to question 3 was Rita. The answer to question number 4 was Monica. And question number 5 was Jessica Sharawat.
I have a theory.
I was thinking female pop stars and
well, as I said, it can be in universe or out of universe. So, Batman, have you any idea which do you think is the odd one out? For a point, which is the odd one out? Question 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5?
I have no idea, to be honest. 4.
And what's the connection?
And they're all female.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, Romby, which is the odd one out?
I'm going to go with 3, and I have no idea why.
George Trevor? For the steal, really. This is the key.
It's going to end up being something really obvious in the end, I'm sure.
No, knowing you, Nick, I don't think it's going to be in universe, the connection.
Right.
So that would involve too much RE knowledge. So I'm going to say Monica is the odd one out.
Right.
And it's got something to do with pop music.
Star.
No idea.
Oh, I thought you had a theory. That's why I left you to.
I did, but then I was going to say something like questions 3 and 4 don't have surnames, and the connection is they're both Outbreak characters.
I mean, you're not wrong, obviously, with those type of things, but that's a bit obvious. There is a stronger connection. And what was your answer? Sorry, Ty. Potentially, of course, if you get it right, you may. On what other answers.
I'll say Rita. Then question 3. I don't know why.
I'm afraid no points scored. The odd one out was question number 1, Deborah Harper, for the fairly obvious connection that all the other answers are female characters that appeared in Lou Bega's hit Mambo No. 5.
Oh, God.
I was right. I said it had to do with pop music. Oh my God.
And just for our listeners...
How in the moist barrel of fucks are you supposed to get that?
And for our listeners, let's listen to that extract of the song.
I like Angela, Pamela, Sandra, and Rita. And as I continue, you know they're getting sweeter. A little bit of Monica in my life, a little bit of Erica by my side, a little bit of Rita's all I need, a little bit of Tina's what I see, a little bit of Sandra in the sun, a little bit of Mary all night long, a little bit of Jessica, here I am, a little bit of you makes me your man.
Yes, all the characters, Angela, Rita, Monica, and Jessica, in Mambo No. 5. So that means the winner of the quiz is Batman with 2 points. Well done, Batman. Oh, brilliant.
It was obvious, but it's not that obvious.
So, depending on how well that went down, we'll either do a similar theme to that next time, or we'll just have a standard 5-question quiz. Join us next time when you'll find out the answers to that question. Oh, I don't know. I was planning the quiz, and I think it happened to come on the radio, and I just noted that, they're in Resident Evil. Oh, so is she. And I thought, you know what, we could do a quiz around this. So, that really does nearly bring us to the end of our podcast. We're going to have a quick preview of what you can expect next time. Episode 27 will be a Revelations 2 special. We've been talking about it for the past couple of podcasts, but we're going to do a special 4-part format in honour of the fact that this game is getting episodic releases. This is something that's going to be handled predominantly by Batman and Stars Tyrant, who are succumbing to Capcom's temptation to download the releases periodically, whereas I'm trying to remain spoiler-free and will purchase the game when it comes out in disc format. So, Batman, do you want to tell people what you were planning on doing?
Well, it's just simply recording 4 separate parts, 1 for each episode. It's just so we can sort of talk and speculate about what's going to happen without actually knowing what's going to happen. Yeah,
the idea being is that it should, as Capcom intend, generate the necessary speculation that they want and the general, excitability of the fans, and whether our hopes and fears, depending on each episode released, come to be true or not. So, in many ways, we're falling into the hands of Capcom quite nicely.
Present it to you in one cast, and we can see how wrong we were.
Exactly, yes. So, we can see how we go from there. So that's something to look forward to. So if anyone wants to do MP3 call-ins anyway for Revelations 2 when it comes out, that will be more than welcome. You can always send it to me at snickers3112@hotmail.com, and we can get that sorted out for you. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for listening, and thank everyone who's participated in the podcast. It's goodbye from me, Neptune.
Goodbye from me, Batman.
Goodbye from me, George Trevor.
Goodbye from me, Stars Tyrant.
Goodbye from me, Robbie.